Hello, movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, a podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about the Australian thriller drama series, The Clearing. I think there's also like a UK drama series called The Clearing, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. I'll have to Google that one later. But this one stars Teresa Palmer, Miranda Otto, and Guy Pearce. This is I think it's meant to be like a crime drama series. It says thriller. Nothing about it seemed like very thriller-y to me, but I have only watched the first episode. But this one is basically about Teresa Palmer's character, Freya. I get the feeling, and again, I have only watched the pilot episode of this, so I'm not sure exactly where the show is going overall. I have not read the book that this series is based on, so I'm not sure exactly like where the story is going. But basically, Freya kind of hears about a child who's been kidnapped, and you get to see the before scene of that taking place before she hears about it. But it triggers in her kind of this irrational fear. I get the sense that potentially when she was younger, she was connected to the cult. I'm going to call it a cult. I think it is meant to be a cult that is abducting children in this television series. So I think she is connected to them somehow, or potentially could be one of the children that had been abducted at one point. Miranda Otto's character is what I guess would be the head of this cult. Like, she is the person that they are all listening to and like following the orders of. And based on like the pilot episode, Miranda Otto's character has this like very bleach white hair. And so every kid that gets kidnapped gets their hair bleached to look similar to hers. I'm not entirely sure, again, having only watched the pilot episode, what the goal or end goal of this particular cult is. Like, I don't know why they are taking children and like dyeing their hair and all of that stuff. But I have to say, I don't know. This one kind of is giving me the same feeling that the television series, The Last Thing He Told Me, was giving me, where the acting wasn't particularly good, but the premise or like what was happening in the story, or the story itself, I guess, was intriguing enough that I was like, ooh, I want to see what happens. And with The Last Thing That He Told Me, that television series, I feel like that one was deeply disappointing. Like, I was intrigued and wanted to know what happened in that one, and ended up watching the entire season through. And it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. Like, it wasn't like, the story didn't really go anywhere. It just sort of fizzled, the way that they ended it and kind of the steps that happened in it. I guess I looked back and was like, ooh, I wish I had had that time back. And so that makes me a little bit gun shy with The Clearing, because I feel like the premise of the cult and of them taking these children, and like, I want to know what the deal is with the dyeing the kids' hair, and I want to know why they're taking kids in the first place, and I want to know, like what the whole point is, and how the character of Freya, Teresa Palmer's character, like, I want to know how she's tied in. But I'm worried that it's the same, because it sort of feels similar to The Last Thing He Told Me, that I'm like, oh no, what if I watch this one all the way through and it's it's just as disappointing. Like, I'm not as interested because I feel like because of the fact that like in the pilot episode, right, they haven't given you the backstory of Freya. So when she hears that like this kid has been kidnapped, she sort of like overreacts to it, which is what sort of was the red flag to me, to be like, oh, she must be connected to this cult in some way, which is what I imagine is the outcome of the story. But because the audience isn't supposed to really know that at this point, to me, her reaction is just like extreme, over the top. And then there's this one sequence where her son, she has a son in the show, and he's kind of like throwing a tantrum about something, and he like has locked himself in his room, and she's trying to get the door open, and she ends up hitting him in the eye with a doorknob, and then telling him when he goes to school to like tell everyone it was an accident. So it was like the actual cliche of women who get beat, like lying and saying like, oh, I tripped and fell into a doorknob. But it was like actually that she hit him in the eyeball with a doorknob. Like, it was just a very strange sort of moment to happen in this television series, that it was just one of those little things that you pick up on in an episode where you're like, oof, this has the potential, you know, to go south and be not very great. And so I'm worried, I'm like gun shy, you know, from wasting time. I don't know. I'm torn on whether or not I want to continue this one. So I can't really say whether I would recommend it or not. I think if you want to see like Miranda Otto, who I very much enjoy, like playing in something, and her character, by the way, of this like cult leader, she actually does a really great job. Like, her performance is standout, I feel like, beyond everyone else, to the point where it kind of then makes everyone else look like their acting isn't as good because hers is done so well, you know? But I don't know. You guys are going to have to let me know what you think of The Clearing if you're watching this one, because I feel torn on whether or not I want to continue this one and whether or not I think it has the potential to like get better over time. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family. You can find me on Instagram at Cinematic Sarcastic Podcast, and I hope to see you in the next episode.